Shane van Gisbergen, who we've talked about quite a lot on these programs over the last year or so. He's here in America full-time, racing in the Xfinity Series. That's going to be his main series, but he's going to run some Cup races as well, some Truck Series races, and this ARCA race at Daytona. He'll be in the number 28 car for Pinnacle Motorsports. Shane Huffman will be his crew chief. Joe, what can we expect from SVG? You followed his career much longer than I have. Do you expect him to pick up the super speedway racing like that, or is it going to be a situation where it takes him a little bit of time to adapt to it?
I got to say, isn't it? I never thought we'd be talking about Shane van Gisbergen and ARCA on this program. So this is very exciting to see Shane van Gisbergen doing this. When it comes to this race, I think Shane van Gisbergen, knowing how he is, he wants to go out there and perform as strong as possible. He doesn't want to go in there thinking, let's just finish the race, gain the experience, gain laps, gain what some folks would call respect of, I'm not doing anything too crazy to try to earn the veterans' respect. Because remember, big picture, he's looking into NASCAR, not racing a full season with ARCA or coming back to ARCA to race next year. This sort of reminds me of a little bit of when Juan Pablo Montoya made his first ARCA start at Talladega. And he had some pretty good, impressive runs going that race. I think he had some contact, fell towards the back. I could see Shane van Gisbergen being towards the front, trying to do the best he can, because he knows if he could get a surprise win, steal the headlines, that would steal the headlines, I think, the entire weekend, regardless of what happened in Daytona 500, will be who won the Daytona 500. And by the way, Shane van Gisbergen won the ARCA race, and he's still on his way towards NASCAR. So I think Shane van Gisbergen is motivated to go there, get a top 10 finish, top 5 finish. I think will be a great deal, great pretty much weekend for him to say, we got a top 5 finish. I do not see him just saying, hey, we had a great, wonderful weekend. I stuck around 20th. We got up during pit stops. We avoided the trouble, and we finished the race in 20th. I don't see that in his DNA. Everything he seems to get into, whether it's the Cup Series car, World Rally Championship car, he really tries to get the most out of the car, the most out of himself. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what he's done. And he has the connections with Trackhouse. I can only see him talking to Ross Chastain, Dan Suarez, and other allies trying to gain insight of what to do in Daytona.
Yeah, and for anybody that thinks, top 5 or a win might be a little bit too ambitious or out of the question, you mentioned Juan Pablo Montoya. He finished 3rd that day in his ARCA debut, so it is certainly within the realms of possibility for a driver with the talent level that Shane van Gisbergen clearly possesses. And, I've got to be honest, of course, I've said on this show last year that or on Grid Tonight rather, that, I thought that this start that he's being forced to make in ARCA to gain approval for the super speedways, might not be entirely necessary given a driver of his caliber and his experience and being a Cup Series race winner, having to run an ARCA race to get approval for Xfinity. Again, I understand why they're doing it for the consistency. I just don't know that, it looks right on paper for a driver who's already achieved so much to have to step into this series here, but I'm sure he's going to be happy to have a track time and have the experience, and we'll see. I'm sure he's going to make the most of it, and like you said, Joe, might even turn some heads here.
Turn some heads, and speaking about turning, I think the big thing Shane van Gisbergen needs to be careful of and mindful of when we come to the bump drafting, we've seen this in the Cup and all the levels, picking the right time to bump draft, because if you did get it wrong, you could turn the car in front of you, and 50% of the time, that car could spin and take you out as well, too. And that's the last thing I think Shane van Gisbergen would want to do. So I think he's really going to be a little bit more careful, try to push if they're going to at all on the straightaways. But I think that could be one of his bigger concerns is where can he make a mistake? It will be in that portion when it comes to the bump drafting. Losing the draft, that's one thing. If you get freight trained, everyone goes low and you went up high, you could rebound. But you turn somebody by bump drafting, especially in the tri-oval where the cars are very unstable, that's where I think the bigger issues could occur. And that's, I think, a area Shane van Gisbergen might play a bit conservative is the bump drafting.
Yeah, and let me be clear and clarify as well. I'm not saying throw him into bump drafting with absolutely 0 laps of practice or anything, but he doesn't need any of that. I'm saying, could he have just gotten that in a couple of Xfinity Series practice sessions or in off-season Daytona testing? I know we don't have nearly as much practice time as we used to, and that's a whole nother discussion we could get into. We now qualify for the Daytona 500 before we even have a single lap of practice, which I think is a little ridiculous.